Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Mallinson and I'm Director of Medical Education here at Guy's and St Thomas's.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ross Tilley and I'm your Guardian of Safe Working. And we're both here to tell you a little bit about the new juniors contract that you're going to transition on to the first week of December, and tell you what about your responsibilities and a little bit about how it's going to work. So, trainees will be gradually moving on to this contract until everybody finally transitions by this time next year. And you will be second in line after the obstetric and gynecology trainees were in the vanguard at the beginning of October. So you might want to talk to them a little bit about how it's going for them. So what's new in the contract? There's some working hours rules which have changed from what you're used to. Work scheduling is a new concept. Exception reporting is replacing diary carding. And there's my new role as the Guardian of Safe Working. I won't go into details about all the very many rules there are around working in the new contract, but suffice it to say that your operational rota will have taken these into consideration and will have been approved by the Human Resources Department to adhere to them. One of the key changes you will have noticed is that there will be no fixed annual leave in your new contract. It will be a much more flexible arrangement. There will still be some rules around the minimum number of people who need to be still committing a service commitment at any one point, and you will need to give notice for requests for annual leave. But departments should be open to flexibility around that. Rest arrangements, you have a minimum of 11 hours rest between shifts, and breaks during shifts. You should have a meal break. If you're having a shift greater than 5 hours duration, you should have 30 minutes, and another 30 minutes if your shift is over 9 hours. Those two can be taken together as an hour lunch break, but they shouldn't be parcelled up at the end of your shift and go home early, because that's not acceptable. Work scheduling. You should have received a generic work schedule 8 weeks prior to starting, so somewhere around the first week of October. And this should tell you the range and pattern of duties that you can be expected to work, the kind of shift lengths, the approximate start and finish times, and that have been used to calculate your new payment. You should also have received some information around payment from Human Resources. In addition to that, the generic work schedule will also have some training learning outcomes.
It's very important when you're a foundation doctor, and any doctor that's got a numbered applied to it, that we make sure that you have all the educational opportunities realised to you. And this brings in your personalised work schedule. So yes, you have an enormous amount of work to do, but also you're training and developing and have your own curriculum needs. So it's important that at the beginning of your new placement that you meet your educational supervisor and your clinical supervisor as soon as practicable. This is usually within the first 2 weeks of starting. And it's really important that you set out your learning needs and objectives against the curriculum that you're following, so that you are able to pass your ARCP, to understand your own career needs, and also any other responsibilities that you may incur, either being representative on a committee or a meeting, and also to look at how your post is going to achieve all of those learning needs, as well as the service needs that the department needs you to do. And it's important that this generic work schedule is not your rota, but for you to understand that your learning needs fit within that.
Now, in the new contract, diary carding is replaced by exception reporting as a much more real-time responsive way of monitoring what in fact you're working and seeing if comparing that to your personalised work schedule. Your exception report is reported each time your working pattern deviates significantly or regularly from your work schedule. Now, this may be in terms of your hours of work and your breaks, which I would have oversight of, as they are safety issues within the new contract.
And as you're a Director of Medical Education, it's important that you are well rested and looked after and in an appropriate frame of mind to take on your learning opportunities and that you feel supported in those roles.
So if you're required to stay late after a shift, and say for example going home an hour later than would have been expected from your personalised work schedule, then you can complete a safety exception report. If on the other hand, your department says would you be prepared to work additional work if you're registered through the Staff Locum Bank, that is not something that you would be paid for separately, and it's not something that would warrant an exception report. So how will you go about exception reporting? It's important that you report every exception individually. It is not permitted to bundle these exceptions into a single report. There is a web-based system which you can use on your smartphone. I'm afraid it isn't an app. On your smartphone or a web internet browser. If you're completing an exception report on a trust computer, then just to let you know that you would need to use Mozilla Firefox currently, rather than Windows Internet Explorer, as the system requires Mozilla to function. I've put the email address, the website address at the bottom of the screen. However, you will be sent it individually along with your logins and your passwords so that you can complete the reports. Now, in a report, what you're required to do is to detail the sort of thing that happened, the circumstances around the exception, and whom you informed at the time. It's very much a documentation process, but this is not a replacement for actually talking to your department and making sure that everybody's aware of the sort of things that are going on. What I'm going to request is that you nominate your clinical supervisor and not your educational supervisor, as you're a foundation trainee. It wouldn't be possible for an educational supervisor, for example in psychiatry, to know the ins and outs of what's happening in the emergency department, or vice versa. And so it is the supervisor that is actually in the department that you're working at the time that really needs to handle this report and understand the circumstances around it occurring and what action should be taken as a result. So please nominate your clinical supervisor. You'll also be asked to, from a drop-down list, choose the rota that you're working on. And there should be at least two rotas that you might recognise. One is your daytime specialty rota, for example, general medicine, and the other is a hospital at night. So if the circumstances were that you didn't get a break during a hospital at night shift, then you would choose the hospital at night rota. If, on the other hand, for example, you missed a training opportunity and not able to go to a clinic, then you would choose the daytime specialty rota. The website looks like this, and you can see George Tomlinson has completed 5 exception reports, and they're a mixture of safety and training. And you should get your login shortly. If you do not receive your login by the time you start in your foundation post, then please do contact Human Resources or myself, and we will ensure that you get sent a login details.
It's very important that any exception reports are reported in a timely fashion. This is so that we can make this a live system and actually work with you to create solutions and to ensure that you don't miss out on any of the fantastic opportunities that we have to offer here. So if there's an absolute limit of 14 days for you to create a report, and that's especially within 7 days if you think you need payment, and definitely within 48 hours if there are safety concerns. We really do want to make sure that we respond to those very quickly. And you'll notice then that any exception reports that you write down will automatically get sent to your supervisor, to your guardian of safe working, Dr. Tilley, and myself as Director of Medical Education for training, if there's a training report there.
So, once you have nominated your named clinical supervisor in the report, what happens? Well, you should meet with them, either face-to-face or telephone discussion or Skype, however you and your clinical supervisor normally communicate. And they will investigate the circumstances around the exception report. Any necessary remuneration will be decided upon, and there may be some local guidance in particular departments around that. That might be in the form of time off in lieu or payment if you've worked excess hours.
It's very important that you also notice any learning opportunities that you miss. The new junior doctor contract is not just about payments, it's also about making sure that you complete your learning opportunities, and if you miss out on something that you expected to do because of service commitment, then again we need to make sure that you are compensated for that learning opportunity within the next 2 weeks.
So, as a result of your exception report, the clinical supervisor will have a good idea as to whether this is a one-off event or whether it's part of a wider pattern that's likely to be repeated for yourself or for another doctor in training on your rota. You need to document, but the pair of you need to document in the exception report what has been agreed. And I think it's also a good idea to include the departmental faculty or rota lead so that they can implement any time off in lieu, for example, or understand the consequences of the exception report. They might want to monitor costs as well. As a trainee, you need to ensure that your educational supervisor is aware of what is going on as well. And so between you and your clinical supervisor, discuss who's going to inform your educational supervisor. So here's an example of an exception report, and you can see here's an educational supervisor. You can see a number of trainees that they've got that they're supervising, and they can take an overview of what has happened as a result of the individual reports. And they will approve a particular agreement as a result of the exception report, and you yourself will then be able to approve that you agree the outcome as well. As the guardian of safe working, I have an overview. This is a mock-up. We haven't had quite that many exception reports to date, but I'll be able to keep an overview and see which particular areas of the trust might be problematic for either training or service. And Claire has a similar view from her training perspective. So, if you complete an exception report, your named clinical supervisor is nominated. You can choose, on the left-hand side, you choose the hospital at night as your rota, and you discuss it with your named clinical supervisor. It's not possible to have time off in lieu from hospital at night. Those shifts are the minimum required number of people already in the trust. So any hospital at night would be payment in as recompense. If, on the other hand, it's in your specialty, you would discuss it with your named clinical supervisor, and you might agree for time off in lieu, or, as Claire has said, an alternative training opportunity in lieu, and payment could be agreed. And it's important that your educational supervisor has an overview. So if it's a one-off event, then that would be all that's required. But if, on the other hand, it's part of a pattern, then your clinical supervisor would need to undertake a work schedule review, and that's a level 1 work schedule review, which remains within the department. That happens either as a result of the very nature of a report, or because of frequency of reports by either a single trainee or a number of trainees. What's involved in a work schedule review is really looking at the circumstances that created that pattern of working, and deciding whether a rota change needs to be undertaken or an organisational change. For example, it may be that a later start and a later finish is appropriate, or it might be that a handover timing changes, or the number of patients seen in a clinic is altered. So it may have implications for a single trainee or many trainees, depending on the particular exception. If the trainee is unhappy, if you are unhappy with the result of that work schedule review, then a level 2 work schedule review that has nominees of either Claire or myself to participate in it could have another look at what the suggestions were and see if further changes could be made. A level 3 work schedule review is similar to the old grievance procedure in the old contract, and I really hope we don't get that far. So there are a small number of circumstances under which the guardian of safe working would fine a department because of particular types of working. That might be excess working in more than 48 hours per average over a rota cycle. It might be working more than 72 hours in any 7-day period, or your 11-hour rest period between shifts being reduced due to excess working to less than 8 hours. If that were to happen, then the department would be fined 4 times the hourly rate that applied when the excess occurred. You yourself would keep 1.5 times that sum, and the remaining 2.5 times is held by the guardian of safe working in a central fund. As a doctor in training, you're one of the only members of the NHS staff who actually get paid for your breaks. So therefore, if a large number of breaks were missed, more than 25% of breaks in any rota cycle, I would fine a department twice the hourly rate for those missed breaks, and that entire sum would be held by the guardian of safe working. So what happens as a result of that is that we have a junior doctors forum to scrutinise what is done with that money. And we're looking for members of the Junior Doctors Forum. As foundation trainees, you have 4 Junior Doctors representatives on the forum to help look at the disbursement of fines. But we would like the Junior Doctors Forum to also play a role in improving the conditions and giving us the benefit of your experience of what is going on the shop floor, and looking to you to help us with solutions in that.
So the Junior Doctors Forum is a very powerful tool within the organisation for us to make really good changes for our patient care. It's important that you are in the right educational environment, that you feel supported and rested and fed appropriately. And so appropriate elected trainee representatives, and you will have had emails requesting representatives, and we do have spaces on our foundation quota for the Junior Doctor Forum. And you will be working with other junior doctors in other specialties of different grades, and by doing that we can all work together to ensure that we have the appropriate workforce at the right time and in the right place, and to do that in a coherent manner, and to work with what is Dr. Tillier's Guardian of Safe Working to make sure that these meetings are appropriately utilised to ensure that we get some fantastic outcomes from working with you.
So it's my role to oversee the Junior Doctors Forum, to oversee your working hours, and I have a responsibility to inform the wider trust and the trust management as to the issues that are going on with your safe working within the trust, and for that I'm required to write a report 4 times a year. That includes information on your safe working, any gaps in your rota, because that has implications for the number of hours and workload for the remaining doctors on the rota, any plans to solve those gaps, and details of any fines that have been levied. And this is said not only to the Trust Board, but to organisations outside of the Trust who might monitor the quality of education and training that we're doing here.
So as we enter into this new phase with the new contract and what the training implications are, I have to see every change in rota and to make sure that all of those rotas have appropriate amount of educational time within it. You will be meeting your clinical education supervisors where you're looking at your own opportunities, and we need to make sure that we realise all the potential within your posts for your own progression. There will be minimum standards depending on the specialty and what grade you are as to what you should be expected to do, and it's my role to make sure that I ensure that those training plans are delivered, and making sure that service doesn't take you away from those learning opportunities. So there are much larger roles for your clinical education supervisor, and I would ask you to work with your clinical education supervisors to look at what your personalised work scheduling is, to look at how you can work on your exception reports in a positive way to make sure that you can resolve them in a sensible manner, and to use your work schedule reviews so that you're working in a safe and supervised manner, but also developing and training at the same time. And this is, of course, all appropriate for making sure we offer the best care for our patients.
So the Trust has produced a Junior Doctors Contract Process Handbook that includes much of the information we've discussed today, and also includes some information around what you can expect to see on your payslip at the end of the month. If you have any questions around what we've discussed today, you're welcome to contact Claire or myself on these email addresses so that we can discuss any particular personal issues you have or any queries.